Hello, and welcome to another episode of Digging a Little Deeper into English with Kirsten, where we will investigate what successful language learners have done in order to transform their communication and make that career change they were looking for. So, welcome to our first episode. Today we're going to have a chat with Jordan, who will tell us all about his journey in some detail. Let's get started. So, thank you very much for agreeing to join me today. And why don't you start by telling me a little bit about who you are, your background, where you're from, and how you learned and developed your English.
Yeah, good evening, Kirsten. Thanks a lot for having me on this show. So, morning all. My name's Jordan Cicera. So I was originally born a Malaysian in Kuala Lumpur. I moved to Perth, Western Australia in 2008. This was to further my education and university studies. So I studied extractive metallurgy as a course of choice at Murdoch University. Currently, I work as a metallurgist in WA's mining industry in the lithium sector. So in my household, English is the first language and Bahasa Melayu is our second language.
Oh, that's interesting. So your family are here in Australia,
yes,
but you all speak English at home by choice?
That's correct, yes. So we still do actually speak Bahasa Melayu time to time just to keep our skills up. If we want to say something so other people do not understand, then we converse in Bahasa Melayu.
Sure. Okay. Great. And what motivated you to join the mining industry?
So it's a bit of a strange one, Kirsten. You see, when I finished college, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I did do a foundation in science, but back then I knew I wanted to do something science-based in Australia, but just didn't know what. So Dad played a really big influential role where we both went to the universities in WA just to have a chat with the course coordinators, just to get an idea of the courses which were in demand and related to the mining industry. And it was suggested to us to have a look at extractive metallurgy, which was a very niche course. And pretty much ticked all the boxes. We were pretty happy with what it entailed and the requirements as well. So enrolled in it was a 4-year course of study, and here I am, on graduate.
Good old Dad, hey?
Yeah.
Excellent.
A big role.
So you speak English at home and you work in Australia, so you speak English all the time, pretty much now. Can you tell me about your English learning journey?
Yes, so like I said, definitely helped because in the household, again, English was our number one language, so I didn't really have any issues learning English.
When you were in Malaysia, was Bahasa Melayu the primary language you used at home?
It was, so English was the primary language. Bahasa Melayu was
even in Malaysia?
Yes, because why I suppose that was the case was because my family, we're all Eurasians, and in a Eurasian household, English tended to be the number one language. In Malaysia, I mean, much like Malaysians know, it's very race dependent as to which becomes your primary language in the household. So in an Indian household, it could be Hindi or Tamil or English, or in a Chinese household, it again could be English being your first language, or Mandarin or Cantonese, or in a Malay household, it would be Bahasa Melayu, and for the wealthier Malays, and it would be English. But in our case, Eurasians, English was the only language we knew, and Bahasa Melayu was what we learned in school, just for the examinations and tests.
Okay. So your English was quite strong before you came to Australia?
It was pretty strong, but I suppose I've been educated the Malaysian way, so obviously learning English from
in Malaysia is quite different to English in Australia.
It's what you would call Manglish, where it's very quick, hurried, and
there's a lot of Malay grammar used with the English words. I have to remind myself constantly not to do that. For example, can or not. That's such a Malay
Yes.
English. Can or not. It's a direct translation
Look,
from Malay.
I'll put my best attempt at this. This one really cracks me up. It's two different sentences. Once in Malaysian English and once in Australian English when it comes to getting food with a friend. So in Australian English would be the case of, hey man, I'm hungry. Do you want to go grab a bite to eat? Whereas in Malaysia, it's like, hey, you hungry? Come, let's go eat. So, and both mean the same thing, but
exactly. And when I'm teaching English, I have to keep remembering not to speak Bahasa, Malay version of English.
Yes. No.
Yeah. So did you have any real difficulty when you arrived in Australia? Our accent or how fast we speak?
Yeah, funny you should say that. I actually did have a fair bit of difficulty.
Okay.
I mean, this is where it gets interesting because I came as a student, right? So in classes, the content and whatnot, that wasn't any difficult because the lecturers, they spoke in a very formal English tone, so I fully understood all that. But when it came to interacting with course mates, friends, that's where the difficulties arose because with English, whilst I had a good and solid background in English, what I didn't have to understand was the culture because the Australian culture is a very unique one in a sense. There's a lot of inside jokes and how English is used in the language. It's very, very, very different from what I was used to in Malaysia. It felt to me in the first 3 years, it was learning a completely new language, learning a new set of rules, a new culture embedded in the language.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I suppose, I mean, nowadays I do use English daily, for work, meeting new people in a professional setting. And I suppose one other interesting thing as well, I'm actually learning German on the side, and I use English as a yardstick. Because German is a language, I mean, English is a language that's evolved from Germanic roots. So it's interesting to see the similarities, but English is always my basis of comparison.
Okay. Yeah. And how did you overcome the difficulties you had when you first got here? You said it took 3 years. What did you have to do?
I suppose for me, once I learned a lot more about the culture. Let me just take a step back. So I suppose what really accelerated the process was because with my course of choice, extractive metallurgy, when we started, the classrooms were big. There were probably about 40 to 80 students, but over time, when we started specializing in the course got a lot smaller. Our classes went from like 80 odd people to suddenly 30, and there was only like 5 of us. So all my friends, like there were no Malaysians or much Asians, my course of choice. So my friends by default ended up being Australians, and just being with them, interacting with them, hanging out with them, that's definitely sped the process up. But what I see all too common, you get a lot of people that's starting courses and they'll by default hang out with friends from the same country, and that just slows the process. For example, I've known people that have been living in Australia for 10 plus years, but still haven't quite got that good grasp of English.
Or like Australians who live in Malaysia and work in English and speak in English and don't learn Malay very well.
As well, yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, that's my difficulty. Is there anything you wish you knew about learning English before you came here? You said you weren't really aware of the cultural aspects. Do you think if you had been aware of those, they would have helped?
Yeah, look, it's a bit of a complex one because this is something I have been thinking about a lot recently when I look back on the years when I first came to Australia. It's not something that you can read in a book, and it's not something you can explain to people. If people were to tell you you have to relearn a new culture, obviously you'd be like, no, I know English. I'll just go to Australia and wing it. It's not like that. It's a very difficult thing. Like all the jokes that knew, like for me, the jokes and interactions I knew from a Malaysian standpoint were not applicable in any sense in Australia. Some of the tones that you use, like people would just look at you funny.
Yes.
I still remember what caught me out was some of the name pronunciations. One, funnily, one that still cracks me up is the name Jeff, spelled with a G.
Yes.
I met a lecturer and I called him Geoff.
Yes, Geoff.
Yeah, Jeff.
Yeah,
I suppose on a bit of a tangent to language, I suppose in the culture, one of the hurdles I had to overcome was stopping myself from calling people sir, Mr., Mrs.
Yes.
That was one of the hardest thing. Yeah, I kept all the lectures like Mr. and you told me please stop calling me that.
Australians hate it.
Yeah.
we really hate any reference like that.
Yeah,
we're so informal.
Yeah, it's what I love about Australia. Everyone's on the same level. There's no hierarchy. I mean, there is on paper, but your boss can still be your mate and good friend. You can still hang out with your boss, and
they can be wrong.
Yes, exactly.
You're allowed to disagree with them.
Yeah, just what else? I suppose other things to overcome the difficulties as well. Yeah, it's the Australian English. It's riddled with slangs, sarcasm. So it's really a big thing. Learning how to identify sarcasm. It's a very valuable skill to have, especially when it comes to English learning. Because I suppose when we learn English, it's very highly formal, but you have to understand that the Australian English is very informal and casual at times.
Yeah. You raise an interesting point. It just occurred to me now. You're living in Australia and your tone, your choice of words is very Australian already. Do you have any difficulty understanding other accents? British? They're very different style and culture from speaking. American, Irish, some of the other accents, or are you comfortable with all of them now?
I personally feel I am comfortable with them. I mean, there are obviously some challenges, but the ones I still time to time struggle with would be the Scottish accent. But for the most part, usually people speak a bit slower and that's helped, but for the most part hasn't been a challenge.
I love listening to it. It's like a game. Can I understand what they're saying?
Yes, exactly right. And comparing it back to the formal English, and then you realize every country that speaks English, they've got their own nuances.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for sharing the journey. Have you got any final tips as we wrap up for people who are considering doing this? Any advice?
Yeah, look, I actually do have 5 tips I would like to share.
Please do. Excellent.
All right. So I suppose for the first tip, what I would advise is just to be ready to embrace using English in a different cultural setting. So much like what I said earlier, understanding slang, sarcasms, and puns. And again, it's not something that you can read about in a book. It just comes with time. Like what I found, the more I spend interacting with people of different backgrounds, so Australians, Africans, and other Asians, it's just something it comes to you naturally. Whereas when you're that's my first point. Second one I would say is to know the difference between formal and informal use of English.
Yes, I cover that in all my courses. It's really important.
Yeah, so such as an example is with your friends, obviously you tend to take a lazier or more casual tone, whereas when it comes to work, that's where you have to use a more professional setting, like a more formal form of English when it comes to writing reports, emails, and interacting with colleagues.
Yep.
Yeah, so and my third point is definitely be willing to make new friends and try new things in a new country. If you have the means and able to, definitely recommend it. My fourth point would be to, much ties in with my first point, to embrace the culture and the jokes. And look, to be honest, I suppose since I work in the mining industry, it's completely different from an office setting. In an office setting, things tend to be a lot more formal, whereas in the mining industry,
Yes.
it tends to be very, very crude English and slang. It's a completely different world.
Yeah, very good point there.
Yeah, so some of the jokes, like I said, will be crude, but it's just what the mining industry is, really. But I mean, it will definitely make you feel like being a part of the team if you get the joke, and But obviously, with jokes, just if you're the one telling the joke, obviously know that there's a line and do not cross that line.
Yeah.
And my final point is, just to understand that there is a big cultural shift happening in the mining industry nowadays with more and more foreign talent joining companies. I mean, such examples is I work with, so apart from Australians, I work with a Korean lady, I work with a Filipino guy, I work with people from Tanzania, South Africa, and it's all a very diverse sort of background. So just realize that you are not alone. I mean, there's challenge, and I hope those have been helpful tips.
Oh, they were great. They were really, really, it's good to get the insight from the other side for me as well as people listening. So thank you very much for your time, and do stay in contact.
No worries. Thanks for having me, Kirsten. Much appreciated.
You're welcome. Great.
All right. Cheers.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Well, that's it for our interview today. To download a transcript of the audio, click the link below. You'll find it in the show notes. Don't forget, if you want to be notified when the next great interview with successful non-native English professionals in the mining industry is released, click subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. And if you are ready to take control of your English, transform your communication skills, and see that pay back in your career, then shoot me an email at ksdsmith@gmail.com or visit me on LinkedIn. The links are again below in the show notes. Until the next episode, take care and keep on digging.